My Mill wore a wedding dress to my wedding, so I exposed her at the reception. My name is Nina. I'm 28, and I was supposed to be marrying the love of my life, Liam, today. The morning had been a whirlwind of champagne, hairspray, and the quiet, happy tears of my mother and bridesmaids. The sun was shining, the flowers were perfect, and the weight of the world felt light, full of promise. I was cocooned in a bubble of joy, a feeling so pure I thought it was untouchable. That bubble burst the moment I saw her. Let's call my mother-in-law Brenda. From the very first time Liam introduced me, Brenda made it clear I was not what she had envisioned for her son. I was a graphic designer from a middle-class family. She was a retired executive who still held court over her social circle with an iron fist. Her critiques were always delivered with a thin, syrupy coating of concern. "Oh, Nina dear, that's an interesting career choice. Is it stable?" she'd say, her eyes scanning my outfit for any sign of imperfection. "Liam's last girlfriend was a lawyer, you know, such a sharp girl." The wedding planning had been a masterclass in her particular brand of psychological warfare. She hated our venue, a rustic barn, because it was tacky. She despised my choice of a DJ over a string quartet because it was so low class. She even tried to convince Liam to convince me to change my wedding dress, claiming the silhouette was unflattering for a girl with my assets. Liam, bless his heart, was a master of deflection. He'd always smooth things over, telling me his mother was just old-fashioned and didn't mean anything by it. He was a golden child, and to him, his mother could do no wrong. He couldn't see the calculated malice behind every passive-aggressive comment. I saw it all. I saw the way her eyes would narrow when I talked about my family, the slight curl of her lip when I mentioned paying for part of the wedding myself. I spent a year collecting her disdain, storing it away in a mental filing cabinet labeled Brenda's bullshit. But I never imagined she would escalate to this. As I stood there, hidden from view, my father's arm looped through mine, I watched Brenda glide into the church. She wasn't trying to be subtle. She swept down the aisle, her white gown rustling, the veil trailing behind her like a specter. Guests turned, their expressions a mixture of confusion and shock. I saw Liam's aunt lean over to his uncle, her hand flying to her mouth. My own blood ran cold. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a cultural misunderstanding. This was a declaration. She was here to upstage me. My father felt me stiffen and gave my arm a gentle squeeze. I couldn't speak. My throat was tight with a rage so hot it felt like I was burning from the inside out. All the joy, all the excitement of the morning had curdled into a single, seething thought. She was trying to ruin my day. The wedding march began to play, its cheerful notes now sounding like a cruel joke. The doors at the back of the church swung open, and all eyes turned to me. But my eyes were locked on the front of the church, on the woman in white who was beaming, not with happiness for her son, but with the triumphant glow of a victor who had already claimed her prize. My father started to lead me forward, and my feet felt like they were encased in cement. This was supposed to be my moment, my walk, my future. But all I could see was her. A vision in white, a nightmare in lace, waiting for me at the altar. Each step down the aisle felt like a trudge through quicksand. The smiling faces of our friends and family blurred into a watercolor of muted colors and sympathetic glances. I could feel their collective pity, a heavy cloak that settled over my shoulders. My training as a bridesmaid in a dozen weddings had taught me to smile, to keep my chin up, to project an aura of serene bliss no matter what. But that was a performance for a forgotten dress or a late caterer. This was a full-scale invasion. My eyes darted to Liam, standing at the altar. He was handsome in his tuxedo, his face lit with a smile that was entirely for me. But then his gaze flickered past me, and his smile faltered for just a fraction of a second. A flicker of confusion crossed his features before he smoothed it over, his attention snapping back to me as if nothing was wrong. He hadn't truly processed it yet. He probably thought it was a bizarre, attention-seeking fashion choice, but he hadn't connected the dots. He hadn't understood the venomous intent behind it. As I reached the front, my father placed my hand in Liam's. I gave my dad a quick, tight-lipped smile before turning to face my future husband. Brenda had taken her seat in the front row, directly in my line of sight. She had positioned herself perfectly, a vision of virginal white that was a grotesque parody of a bride. She adjusted her veil, catching the light, and gave me a smile that was pure poison. The officiant began to speak, his voice a soothing drone about love and partnership. I tried to listen, to absorb the words that were meant to be the foundation of our marriage, but my focus was shattered. I was hyper-aware of Brenda, of the way she preened, of the guests who were openly staring at her instead of us. The ceremony became a play in which I was a secondary character in my own wedding. When it came time for the vows, Liam's voice was clear and steady. He spoke of loving me through thick and thin, of being my partner and my best friend. His words were beautiful, and a part of me wanted to weep, but the dominant part of my brain was screaming. How could he not see? How could he stand there and promise to be my partner while his mother was actively, publicly trying to humiliate me? When it was my turn, the words caught in my throat. I looked at Liam, at his earnest, loving face, and then at Brenda, who was watching me with an expectant, predatory smirk. I took a deep breath, and the words came out, stronger than I expected. I promised to love him, to honor him, to cherish him. But as I spoke, a new, colder promise was forming in my heart. A promise to myself. I would not be a victim in this story. I would not let her win. The officiant pronounced us husband and wife. Liam lifted my veil, and his kiss was gentle and full of love. For a moment, the world fell away, and it was just the two of us. But as we turned to face our guests, the illusion shattered. The applause was polite, but muted. All eyes were still on Brenda, who was now dabbing at her eyes with a lace handkerchief, playing the part of the emotional mother to perfection. As we walked back down the aisle, a married couple, Liam squeezed my hand. "Wasn't that beautiful?" he whispered, his face still aglow. I just nodded, unable to speak. We were followed not by a shower of rose petals, but by a thick, suffocating silence. The pictures in the garden after the ceremony were a masterclass in awkwardness. The photographer tried to position Brenda on the side, but she kept insinuating herself into the center, her white dress a blinding beacon in every shot. She'd link her arm through Liam's, pulling him close, her smile wide and victorious for the camera. I stood there, a prop in her fantasy. And that's when the seed of an idea, born of pure desperation and rage, began to sprout in my mind. I had prepared a slideshow for the reception, a sweet, funny montage of our lives together. But I also had a backup plan, a secret folder on my laptop, one I had saved for my own sanity, filled with evidence of Brenda's year-long campaign against me and our wedding. It was my insurance policy, my private collection of her cruelty. And as I watched her pose for a photo with my new husband, her hand possessively on his chest, I knew it was time to cash in that policy. The 30 minutes between the end of the photos and the start of the reception were a blur of forced smiles and simmering fury. I was sequestered in a small antechamber with my bridesmaids who were buzzing with a mixture of outrage and concern. They couldn't believe what Brenda had done. Their anger was a comforting warmth, a shield against the cold humiliation I felt. They offered to confront her, to create a scene, to have her removed. But I shook my head. A public shouting match was exactly what she wanted. It would make me look unhinged, emotional, and it would make her the victim. No, this required a different kind of weapon. Precision, stealth. I needed to think. I excused myself, claiming I needed to find the restroom and have a moment of peace. Instead, I made a beeline for the bridal suite where my laptop and the DJ setup were located. My heart was pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. This was a line I had never considered crossing. Exposing someone like this in public at my own wedding? It was nuclear. But then I flashed back to the image of her at the altar, the smug satisfaction on her face as she bathed in the attention that was meant for me. The anger returned, hot and sharp, burning away any hesitation. She had started this fire. I was just going to make sure everyone felt the heat. I found the DJ, a young guy named Kevin who had been a pleasure to work with. He was fiddling with his soundboard, his back to me. I cleared my throat, and he turned around, his cheerful expression faltering when he saw the look on my face. I didn't need to say a word. He had seen Brenda. He knew. I simply pointed to my laptop, which was connected to his system via a USB cable. I opened the folder labeled Reception Slideshow Final. Inside were 2 subfolders. One was named Our Story. The other, a folder I had created months ago in a fit of rage and then hidden away, was named Brenda's Bane. I clicked on Brenda's Bane. It was a gallery of horrors. Screenshots of text messages I had sent to myself, a digital paper trail of my mother-in-law's descent into madness. There were the early ones, complaining about the venue. A barn? Are we milking cows after the ceremony? How utterly provincial! There were the ones about my family. Your father told a joke at dinner. It was common. I can see where you get it. There were the ones about my dress, which she had never seen, but still felt qualified to judge. I hope it's not off the rack. Liam deserves a wife who looks like she didn't buy her gown on sale. And then there were the most recent ones. The ones that proved this was all a deliberate, premeditated attack. A message to her sister from 2 weeks ago. I found the most gorgeous gown. It's white, but not a bride white. It's more of an ivory. She can't get mad at me for wearing ivory. And the final, damning piece of evidence. A message to her friend from just 3 days ago. I'm going to wear it. Let her try to stop me. It's time someone showed her that she's not the only woman in Liam's life. I'm going to ruin this trashy wedding and show everyone who the real star of the show is. I looked at Kevin, my hand hovering over the trackpad. I didn't say anything, but my eyes must have pleaded with him. He looked from the screen to my face, his expression a mixture of shock and understanding. He gave me a single, firm nod. He got it. He quickly unplugged my laptop, made the switch, and plugged it back in. The presentation file was now named Our Story, but the content was anything but. He ejected the drive and handed it back to me. "Good luck," he whispered, a grim smile on his face. I took the laptop, my hands trembling slightly. There was no turning back now. The plan was in motion. I took a deep breath, smoothed down my dress, and walked back towards the reception hall, ready to face my new husband, my monstrous mother-in-law, and the consequences of what I was about to do. The monster I was about to unleash. The reception hall was breathtaking. Twinkle lights were woven through the wooden beams of the barn, casting a warm, romantic glow over the long tables adorned with wildflowers and mismatched vintage china. It was exactly the rustic, elegant vision I had spent a year planning. But the atmosphere was thick with an unspoken tension, a palpable unease that soured the beauty of the scene. Guests were mingling, but their conversations were hushed, their eyes constantly darting towards the head table. And there she was, Queen Brenda, holding court. She had moved her chair to be more centrally located, a physical manifestation of her desire to be the center of attention. She was holding court with a group of Liam's relatives, laughing a little too loudly, gesturing with her champagne flute as if she were the hostess of the evening. Her white dress, under the soft lights, was even more egregious. It was a beacon of disrespect, a constant visual reminder of the stunt she had pulled. Liam and I were announced and made our grand entrance. The applause was more enthusiastic this time, a wave of support from our guests that I deeply appreciated. But as we took our seats at the head table, the energy shifted again. Brenda immediately leaned over, her perfume cloying and sweet, and began telling Liam a long, boring story about someone from her bridge club, completely ignoring me. I sat there, a statue in a wedding gown, sipping my water and plotting my next move. Liam, bless his oblivious heart, tried to include me. "And Nina's mother made the centerpieces. Aren't they lovely?" he'd say, trying to bridge the chasm his mother was creating. Brenda would barely glance at me, offering a dismissive, "Oh, yes, fine," before turning her attention back to her son. The dinner courses came and went. I barely tasted my food. My mind was racing, replaying the images on my laptop, imagining the moment they would appear on the large screen behind the DJ booth. I felt a thrill of fear and excitement, a dangerous cocktail that made my hands shake. Would it work? Would people understand? Or would I just look like a petty, vengeful bride? The speeches began. Liam's best man gave a funny, heartfelt toast that had everyone laughing and crying. My maid of honor spoke of our friendship, her voice thick with emotion, and I felt a pang of guilt for what I was about to do. This was supposed to be a night of love and celebration, and I was about to turn it into a public spectacle. But then I caught Brenda's eye. She was rolling her eyes at my maid of honor's speech, a look of profound boredom on her face. She leaned over to whisper something to Liam's father, who just shook his head, looking weary and embarrassed. The sight of her dismissive contempt solidified my resolve. She had made her choice. Now I was making mine. After the speeches, it was time for the first dance. Liam took my hand and we walked to the center of the dance floor. The opening notes of our song, a sweet acoustic ballad, filled the room. He wrapped his arms around me, and for a moment I let myself sink into his embrace. I rested my head on his shoulder, trying to ignore the woman in white who was watching us with the intensity of a hawk. "I love you," Liam whispered in my ear. "I'm so sorry about my mom's dress. It's weird, but don't let it ruin our night. It's our day." His words were meant to be comforting, but they only highlighted the chasm between us. He still thought it was just weird. He still didn't get it. He didn't understand the malice, the intent. As we danced, I looked over his shoulder at the DJ booth. Kevin gave me an almost imperceptible nod. The song ended, and our guests applauded.
We kissed, and the dance floor opened up to everyone. I excused myself, claiming I needed to check on the cake. Instead, I found a quiet corner in the shadows where I can watch the stage without being seen. My heart was a jackhammer against my ribs. The DJ, a master of showmanship, let a few fast songs play, getting everyone into a celebratory mood. The tension in the room began to ease, the music and dancing working its magic. People were laughing, letting loose. For a moment, it felt like a normal wedding reception. And then the music faded. Kevin tapped the microphone. "All right, everyone, if I could have your attention for a moment," he said, his voice booming through the speakers. "We're going to take a little break from the dancing. The beautiful bride, Nina, has put together a very special slideshow of her and Liam's journey together. So grab your drinks, find your seats, and get ready to fall in love all over again." A collective "ah" went through the crowd. The lights dimmed. The screen behind the DJ booth flickered to life. My breath caught in my throat. This was it. Showtime. The first image appeared on the screen. It wasn't the baby picture of Liam I had originally chosen. It was a crisp, clear screenshot of a text message thread. The contact name at the top read, "Mom." The room, which had been filled with the soft murmur of settling guests, fell silent. A confused hush fell over the crowd. People squinted, trying to make sense of it. On the screen, in Brenda's familiar cursive font, were the words, "A barn? Are we milking cows after the ceremony? How utterly provincial. I can't believe my son is marrying into this." A wave of whispers, like rustling leaves, swept through the hall. I saw Liam's face from across the room, a mask of pure confusion. He looked from the screen to his mother, who had gone rigid in her chair. The slide didn't change. It just sat there for 10 long, agonizing seconds, letting the words sink in. Then, with a soft click, the screen transitioned to the next screenshot. This one was about my family. "Your father told a joke at dinner. It was common. I can see where you get it. We'll have to work on your social graces, dear." A gasp went up from my mother's table. My father's jaw tightened. The whispers grew louder, more pointed. People were no longer confused. They were horrified. The next slide, and the next. A relentless, methodical takedown. Brenda's complaints about the food, the music, the flowers, her passive-aggressive digs at my career, my appearance, my background. Each text was a small cut, and together they painted a devastating portrait of a woman consumed by bitterness and jealousy. I watched the faces in the crowd. Liam's aunts and uncles, who had always been so polite to Brenda, were now staring at her with open disgust. My friends were glaring, their faces tight with anger on my behalf, and Liam, his face was a slow-motion crumble. The confusion was gone, replaced by a dawning, sickening realization. He was finally seeing her. He was finally seeing her. The slideshow continued, a digital parade of her cruelty. Then came the final segment, the texts about the dress. The first one to her sister. I found the most gorgeous gown. It's white, but not a bride white. It's more of an ivory. She can't get mad at me for wearing ivory. A collective groan rippled through the room.
All eyes turned to Brenda, who was now pale, her hands gripping the edge of the table so tightly her knuckles were white. She looked like a cornered animal. And then the final slide, the one that sealed her fate. The message to her friend, bold and unmistakable on the 10-foot screen. I'm going to wear it. Let her try to stop me. It's time someone showed her that she's not the only woman in Liam's life. I'm going to ruin this trashy wedding and show everyone who the real star of the show is. The words hung in the air, a final damning testament to her villainy. The room was utterly, completely silent. It was a silence so profound it was deafening. No one moved, no one spoke. The only sound was the faint hum of the projector. All eyes were fixed on Brenda. Her performance was over. The curtain had been pulled back, and the ugly truth was there for all to see. Her face, which had been a mask of smug triumph all day, was now a canvas of pure, unadulterated shock and rage. She had been exposed, not by a shouting match or a private confrontation, but by her own words, projected for the world to see. The look on her face was, indeed, priceless. It was the look of a queen who had just been dethroned, stripped of her power, and left standing in the rubble of her own making. The silence was broken by a single sharp sound, the scrape of a chair being pushed back violently. Brenda was on her feet. Brenda's rise from her chair was slow, theatrical, and utterly unhinged. For a moment, she just stood there, her chest heaving, her eyes wild as they scanned the silent, staring faces of the guests. She looked like she couldn't comprehend what had just happened. The illusion of the gracious, if eccentric mother of the groom had been shattered, and in its place was a raw, seething monster. Her gaze finally landed on me, still hidden in my corner of the room. Her face contorted with a rage so absolute it was almost terrifying. She didn't scream at first. She let out a low, guttural growl, a sound of pure animal fury. Then she pointed a trembling, accusatory finger in my direction. "You!" she shrieked, her voice cracking with the force of her anger. "You did this, you little witch!" The spell of silence was broken. Guests recoiled, some physically flinching at the venom in her voice. Liam's father, a man who had spent decades in the shadow of his wife's formidable personality, finally sprang into action. He rushed to her side, his face a mask of mortification. "Brenda, stop," he pleaded, his voice low and urgent. "Sit down, you're making a scene." But she was past the point of no return. She shook off his hand, her eyes still locked on me. "Making a scene?" she spat, her voice rising to a fever pitch. "She ruined my reputation. She took private messages and twisted them. She's a liar, a manipulative little tramp who's been trying to turn my son against me from day one." The word tramp hung in the air, a shocking, ugly slur that caused a fresh wave of gasps to ripple through the crowd. This was it, the total breakdown. The mask was not just off, it had been incinerated. Liam, who had been frozen in a state of shocked paralysis, finally snapped out of it. He strode towards his mother, his face a storm cloud of fury and shame. "Mom, that's enough," he yelled, his voice booming with an authority I had never heard him use with her before. "Stop it, right now!" He reached her side and grabbed her arm, trying to guide her towards the exit. But she was past the point of no return. She shook off his hand, her eyes still locked on me. "Making a scene?" she spat, her voice rising to a fever pitch. "She ruined my reputation. She took private messages and twisted them. She's a liar, a manipulative little tramp who's been trying to turn my son against me from day one." The word tramp hung in the air, a shocking, ugly slur that caused a fresh wave of gasps to ripple through the crowd. This was it, the total breakdown. The mask was not just off, it had been incinerated. Liam, who had been frozen in a state of shocked paralysis, finally snapped out of it. He strode towards his mother, his face a storm cloud of fury and shame. "Mom, that's enough," he yelled, his voice booming with an authority I had never heard him use with her before. "Stop it, right now!" He reached her side and grabbed her arm, trying to guide her towards the exit. But Brenda fought him, thrashing like a toddler in the throes of a tantrum. "Get off me!" she screamed, her voice echoing off the wooden beams. "You're taking her side? After everything I've done for you? After I raised you, sacrificed for you? This is how you repay me? By letting this nobody destroy me?" Her words were a desperate, pathetic attempt to regain control, but it was too late. The damage was done. The family's reaction was, as the kids say, priceless. Liam's aunts were on their feet, not to help, but to distance themselves. One was actually shaking her head, a look of profound disappointment on her face. My own mother was being held back by my father, who looked like he was ready to physically intervene if Brenda came anywhere near me. The guests were a mixture of horrified, fascinated, and utterly supportive of me. The narrative was clear. I wasn't the villain. I was the survivor. The scene devolved into chaos. Brenda was now screaming incoherently, a jumble of insults and accusations directed at me, at Liam, at anyone who looked at her. It was a public implosion of epic proportions. The wedding coordinator, a woman who had seen it all, appeared with 2 security guards who had been hired for the event. With a firm but respectful grip, they escorted a still screaming, still flailing Brenda from the hall. Her voice receded down the corridor, a final fading echo of her rage. And then she was gone. A stunned silence fell over the room once more. Everyone looked at each other, their expressions a mixture of shock and relief. The monster had been vanquished. My eyes found Liam's. He was standing in the middle of the dance floor where the chaos had reached its peak. He looked utterly broken. He slowly turned to face me, his face pale, his eyes filled with a sorrow so deep it was almost tangible. He took a hesitant step towards me, his hand outstretched, a silent plea for forgiveness hanging in the air between us. The walk across the dance floor to me was the longest of Liam's life. I could see the weight of his mother's actions crashing down on him, the shame and regret so heavy they seemed to bow his shoulders. The room was still, every eye on us, waiting to see what would happen next. This was the real climax. Not the slideshow, not Brenda's meltdown, but this moment. His choice. He stopped in front of me, his eyes searching mine. I saw no defense of his mother there, no excuses. I saw only a profound, gut-wrenching apology. He didn't speak. He didn't have to. He slowly dropped to one knee right there in the middle of the dance floor, in front of all our friends and family. A soft, collective sigh went through the crowd. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. With trembling fingers, he navigated to his contacts, found his mother's name, and, with a decisive tap, blocked her. It was a symbolic gesture, but it was everything. It was a public declaration. It was him choosing me. It was him drawing a line in the sand. He rose to his feet, his phone still in his hand, and held it out to me, showing me the screen, the proof of his choice. Then he mouthed the words, "I'm so sorry. I love you." The tears I had been fighting back all day finally broke free. But they weren't tears of anger or humiliation. They were tears of relief. I took his outstretched hand, and he pulled me into an embrace that was fierce and protective. The room erupted, not in applause, but in a wave of supportive, happy noise. People were cheering, clapping, some were even crying. My bridesmaids rushed over, enveloping us in a group hug. The tension that had poisoned the room had been purged, replaced by an overwhelming sense of love and solidarity. The DJ, sensing the shift, queued up the music. It was our first dance song again. Liam took my hand and we danced, right there in the center of the floor. It wasn't the perfect, choreographed dance we had practiced. It was a slow, swaying, intimate dance. I rested my head on his shoulder, and for the first time all day, I felt a sense of peace. The rest of the night was a beautiful, chaotic blur. The party came back to life, more vibrant and joyful than before. People danced, they laughed, they celebrated us. It felt less like a wedding and more like a victory party. We cut the cake, we threw the bouquet, we celebrated with the people who truly loved and supported us. In the weeks that followed, the fallout was intense. Brenda sent a barrage of furious emails and voicemails, which we ignored. She tried to enlist Liam's father and siblings to her cause, but they were having none of it. The slideshow had been a wake-up call for all of them, exposing a toxicity they had all enabled for years. Liam went to see her once more, to tell her face-to-face that until she could offer a genuine apology to me and agree to seek therapy, we would have no contact. She refused, and so began a new chapter of our lives, one without her in it. Our honeymoon was a quiet, restorative trip to a secluded beach where we could finally process everything that had happened. We talked for hours, and Liam finally understood the depth of his mother's manipulation and his own role in enabling it. He promised to always be my partner, to always have my back, to always believe me. Our wedding wasn't the fairy tale I had imagined, it was a battlefield. But in the end, it was so much more valuable. It wasn't the day that a Prince Charming married a princess, it was the day a husband chose his wife. It was the day I learned to stand up for myself. It was the day our marriage was truly forged, not in the picturesque beauty of a barn, but in the fires of conflict and betrayal. And as they say, the strongest steel is forged in the hottest fire. We had been through the fire, and we came out stronger, together. And honestly, I wouldn't have it any other way.